Okay, Mandy, we're all set.
I will call the meeting to order. Due to COVID-19, this meeting will be conducted as a virtual meeting, meaning multiple board members will be participating in the meeting from remote locations through the use of communications technology. The district notices the public and/or media may attend at their own risk due to concerns with health and safety and the Safer at Home order. Face masks will be required. All seating will be in accordance with current social distancing recommendations. For members of the public that prefer not to attend, a recording of the meeting will be placed on the district's website for public access as soon as practicable after the meeting concludes, in the absence of any technical difficulties or technical limitations that may arise. All board members will state their name before they begin speaking. Roll call voting will be used for all motions during the meeting. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United
States of America
and to the republic that stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we'll establish the quorum, please, Connie. Yep.
We're all, do I have to do a roll call vote for that?
Yes, please do roll call.
Okay, Nate,
Here.
Mandy,
Here.
Jane. Bob,
here.
Connie, I'm here. We have a quorum.
Okay, and meeting notice certification.
Yes, the meeting was properly noticed.
Okay, approval of agenda, change of sequence, or removal of items.
I have no recommendation for removal or change of sequence. If nobody else does, we can move forward.
I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
This is Connie. I make a motion to approve the agenda.
This is Nate, I second.
Any discussion? Okay, roll call vote, please, Connie.
Nate,
Yes.
Mandy,
Yes.
Jane. You lost Jane. Bob,
You lost me.
Bob,
You lost me.
I don't know what that means.
Bob, we can see you and hear you. Can you hear and see us?
I can see and hear you, but I can't. I cannot see you, but I can hear you.
Okay, do you want to respond to the vote?
Yeah, I said yes already.
Okay, want to make sure. Jane, can you see or hear us? Jane, we can't hear or see you.
Jane, you can vote in the text or in the chat if you want. That'd be a way to respond. And you don't have to worry about the mic.
Jane just left. We're going to hold off for a second and let her re-enter.
Can we move on to me? And come back to Jane?
Yes.
Connie, yes.
Either way, we have the votes to carry that, so we will move on. Motion carried. We'll move to the academic spotlight and hope that Jane can rejoin.
Bob, can you turn off your microphone, please?
Bob, you are in the meeting twice.
My mic is off.
Your mic is off in one, but not the other. You're in twice.
I suggest, Bob, you leave and jump back on. And that'll
Okay, Deb, do you want to do the academic spotlight?
Bob, I'm going to have you go out of the meeting and try to come back in, please.
I'm gonna go out and come back in.
He's in once. He's good now. He left the one. He's in once. I think
Right.
we're okay.
I still can't see anybody. That's right, go ahead.
Okay.
There's Miss Molitor here to talk to you about 5th and 6th grade readers notebooks. So what is a reader's notebook, you're probably asking, because I'm sure when you were going through school, even college, you probably didn't do a reader's notebook, because I know I didn't. So basically a reader's notebook is what it sounds like. It's a notebook for our readers. They have, the purpose of these notebooks is for them to collect all of their thoughts, their ideas, their writing pieces, their anchor charts when they're reading. So students will get anchor charts from lessons and skills that we talked about, and then they'll write in their stories to develop ideas about their books. And then they can write down theories, they can write down debates, they take notes in them, and they're really beneficial to our students for the fact that they promote social learning and communication skills, because a big piece of the notebooks is that kids will utilize them in book clubs and to help them generate conversations and share their thinking. And then they promote a deeper level of thinking than a student who doesn't write about their reading, because as they're writing, they have to be thinking more deeply about the story in order for them to be generating these thoughts or ideas. Whereas a student who just reads the book and moves on, they may not think about, why did a character act that way, or how did the setting play a role? And they're not going to generate the questions that push them farther into their thinking. And then to go off of that, it actually helps them develop a higher level of comprehension, because they are thinking so much more in depth about the story and understanding or trying to understand what's going on in the story and why. So I have some student examples that I wanted to show you. And the first one is an example of how the kids utilize their notebooks to hold on to anchor charts. So these are all things that we talk about in lessons, and a lot of them have prompts for the kids to ask themselves or to remind them, like, hey, when you're talking about techniques, this is a technique, and this might be the goal that the author's trying to achieve. This example is from earlier on in the year. We spent some time with our kids teaching them what's worth putting into your notebook, because just summarizing a chapter is not going to develop that higher level of thinking that we want. So we teach them this double entry journal, which is the left side is from the text and their right side's from their mind. So we teach them that you can write down passages, interesting language, quotes, events, facts, problems, things that they're confused about, and then write from what in their mind is. So like a theory that they have about it, comparisons, maybe they're explaining something, or maybe they're just reacting to it. So this student did hers on the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown's Great Pumpkin. And as I said, we do this in the beginning of the year to really teach them that certain things are going to help them think more in depth than others. Another big piece of their readers' notebooks is that they're generating new thoughts, ideas, theories, and questions about so this was a 6th grade student who was writing about the Maze Runner, and he wrote about how he thought Teresa was sent into the maze by the creators. And then at the bottom here where this arrow is, so I wonder if she will do something. He's generating a new idea or theory that he's going to hold on to as he reads on, and he's going to find evidence to see if that supports it or not, or the evidence supports his theory or not. This next piece is a great example of how a student can take a nonfiction book and provide evidence for their learning, which is a big skill that students need. And it's a standard that we focus a lot on, is providing evidence for your answers. So she wrote down that she thinks her text structure is sequenced because in the story, it talks about how he was a child at first. So she's not only just focusing on text structure here in author's craft, but also providing evidence to support her thinking. And then actually, as she wrote on in the book, or as she moved on in the book, she confirmed her thinking, saying, I was right about the sequence because the next section was on him as a young adult. The next example is a really fun strategy that a lot of the kids like to use that allows them to be really creative. So it's called writing from inside the story, where they actually pretend that they are the character and they add details that weren't there but they thought were there. So they have to think in depth enough to understand what that character might actually be thinking or what might actually happen that the author didn't say in the book. So this student was a 5th grader who was writing from in The Boy in the Striped Pajamas from the boy's perspective. Again, this is from a 6th grade student when we talked about analyzing setting and outside pressures. This student was reading Spirit Bear, and he talked about how he thinks that his parents' lack of attention in the setting, as the setting where the parents weren't very involved, caused him to overreact to things in the story and how that changed him as a person. And then this is a perfect example of how elaboration can help students really understand characters. So she was talking about how in El Depo, the little girl refuses to want to go to a sleepover, and she talks about, I can understand how she's feeling because, and then she goes on to explain why she understands that feeling. So she really built empathy for this character, which is something that we push really hard in 5th and 6th grade reading, is taking those reading skills and bringing them into our life. And that is it. I hope you enjoyed looking at some of our student examples of readers' notebooks. These are something that I love to go through with the students, and I hope you enjoyed it just as much as me. Have a great night, you guys. Thank you for listening. Bye.
Okay, next we'll move on to the consent agenda items, the regular meeting minutes of November 9th, closed session minutes of November 9th, financial status, retirement, resignation, and hirings.
This is Connie. I'll make a motion to accept the consent agenda items.
This is Bob, second.
Is there any discussion? Okay, roll call vote, please, Connie.
Nate,
Yes.
Mandy,
Abstain.
Jane. Can't hear anything. Jane?
Jane, can you hear us?
Her microphone is off. Jane?
Jane, can you hear us?
Connie, yes. Jane?
Jane, we're doing the roll call vote for the consent agenda. Can you hear us?
She has the microphone down a bit on her laptop. No. Yeah, but it's off and she can't hear, because when I had mine all the way down, I can't hear.
Yeah.
The speaker, I
Jane,
mean.
do we want to contact Jane a different way to see if we can get a response?
If we could pause the meeting for a couple minutes, I'm going to call her.
Okay. We'll pause the meeting at this point.
I think it's her speaker, this.
Anybody, can you hear me there yet?
Yes, Bob, we can hear you.
Yeah, I can't see you and I cannot rejoin. I can communicate back and forth. I cannot mute myself. I can't do anything here.
Do you want to try to log out and then log back in?
I've tried it twice and it's still not going. There was it sounded like water running, and then everything went south between Jane and I here. I don't know what that was.
When the last time you didn't unjoin and then rejoin, you joined a second time. So try to unjoin or to leave the meeting and then try to come back.
Okay. All right, I'll do it again.
Okay. We're on pause, so this is a good time.
Okay.
Bob, do you see
Yeah.
the red telephone? When you wiggle the mouse over the bottom of the screen, it's between the mic and the video camera looking icon.
Yeah, no.
Okay, so that's how you would hang up the call. And then at the top, after you hang up the call, I suggest you
I
close
can't
the
even-
tab.
Yeah, I can't even get out of it. My screen's locked up. I cannot even get out.
Okay,
I'm gonna try to. I'm gonna turn the whole computer off here. I'm gonna shut the computer down and bring it back up.
Okay, so the issues we're having are with Jane's laptop at home. So I have her on speakerphone so that she can hear us. So I will try to have us move forward like that. So Jane, do you want to just affirm that you're able to speak to everybody, or you can hear us? Okay, so she did say she can hear us. Let me turn this up. Okay. All right, so Mandy, let's go ahead and resume.
Okay, at this point, Bob is restarting his computer. So we have the Jane issue resolved, but Bob is working on his. At this point, Bob did vote, so we will do Jane, and then we will move on to the next item.
Okay, we're voting on the consent.
They're doing a roll call vote for the consent agenda.
Correct. So Jane,
Jane said yes. Can you move your phone closer to your computer?
Okay, with that, motion carried. Next, we'll move on to discussion action and the presentation of the 2019-2020 audit.
Okay, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. For those that don't know, I'm Stuart Randall. I'm a manager with CLA, the School District Auditors. I'm here to just walk you through an overview of the audit, the results of the audit, go through some summarized financial information, and entertain any questions anyone might have. So one of the things that should have been sent to you was, not only the financial statements, which is about a 60, 70 page packet, but also this morning or this afternoon, a audit handout that has bikers on it or something like that. It's about a 10-page document. I'm going to quick walk through the handout and then entertain any questions. So that sounds good. The first thing,
Stuart, let's see if I can get Deb to get the document up to share screen. Deb, you want to try to pop that up from the attachment? All right, Stuart, there you are. It's coming up.
Okay. So if we go to next page, the first page with real information on it, required communications. So first off, I want to take a second to explain what an audit is and is not. An audit is looking at the district's financial statements to make sure that they are materially correct. They are correct to the users of the financial statements. So that the users of financial statements include you as the board members, but also the superintendent, banks, anyone who might use the financial statements to make sure that they are correct. An audit does not include looking at every single transaction that has occurred during the school year. It includes obtaining an understanding of the processes and internal controls at the district and determining what the riskiest areas are and doing detailed procedures on those areas, plus other areas that come to our attention. So what we have done is we have looked at the financials of the district and verified or determined that they are materially correct. If we want to go a little bit deeper, one thing that we do is we gain an understanding of the district's accounting policies. Every entity has slightly different policies and internal controls. There's more detail within the financial statements themselves, but they can get a bit very dense and detailed. But there's one thing that I want to draw out to your attention this year. If you were to compare last year's financials to this year's financials, there was one major change, and that was the implementation of a new accounting standard passed by the GASB, Governmental Accounting Standards Board, and that has to do with fiduciary activities. Now, the district has a couple of different fiduciary activities, which are funds that the district holds, but aren't really for the district itself. So the one that really was affected was the district has various student organizations and clubs in which the district holds funds for the use of those activities. This standard just changed, tweaked a little bit of the accounting associated with it, and required the presentation of the inflows and outflows of those funds within the financial statements themselves. Not a significant change, but I wanted to draw it to your attention. So if you see something that's a little bit different from last year's, that's what happened. So if we move on to the next page. Thank you. Just wanted to draw everyone's attention to the fact that, as part of the audit, we need to work with management. That includes Pam, that includes Ronnie, that includes everyone in the business and district offices. And we didn't run into any difficulties. Everyone was very cooperative. Little bit of challenge this year with COVID, obviously, but we got through it and we were able to get what we needed and get it done in a timely and efficient manner. We didn't have any changes or material changes that we need to make to the district's financial records, and we were able to issue an unmodified financial statement opinion, which is a clean opinion. It's the best you can get. It means that the financial statements are fairly stated. If we can move on to the next page. Thank you. Like I initially said, one of the things that we do is we gain an understanding of this district's internal controls. And internal controls are the systems of checks and balances, the procedures in place to prevent and detect errors within the financial records. Part of our audit is gaining understanding and then assessing if these internal controls are sufficient for the entity, the district, wherever we are doing an audit. Now, whenever we come across a deficiency in internal controls, we are required to communicate it to governance. And we did have 2 deficiencies we noted during this audit. They're the exact same that we found last year and the year before. The first one is segregation of duties. This is a standard finding for a district of this size. It is essentially a system of internal controls. One of the best controls in place is the ability to have different people do different aspects. However, because of the financial limitations, the size of the district, it's just not practical to have 2, 3, 4 people within the business office all doing separate things. Due to the nature of the district, it has to fall down into Pam or the business office personnel that you have. Now, the district does have various mitigating controls to make sure errors are prevented or detected. However, there is still this issue that we need to make sure that you as the board are aware of, and the importance of the board and management in ensuring that financial transactions are reviewed, approved to prevent errors. The other one is the other deficiency, which we classify as a significant deficiency, is the preparation of the financial statements. The financial statements are the districts to prepare, but I will tell you, I have worked with I don't know how many districts over the years, and I have prepared a set of financials for every single one. So like the other one, a very standard district, school district finding. Before I move on, do any questions on either of those items? Seeing a couple of shaked heads, just move on to the bottom of that slide. Management letter recommendations. There are occasional items that we will find during our audit that don't necessarily rise to the level of a finding, but instead just are small issues that we want to make people aware of. One is we have to, like I mentioned previously, there are these funds set aside for student activities, these organizations. There is a set process that the district has in place that for review and approval of these items. We did note one instance where one form was not signed and approved at every required level. We look at a couple of these transactions every year, and we did note one this year. It looks like it was just an oversight, but it was a lapse in the control process, and wanted to bring it to your attention. But there was just that one item. Next up, I want to get into the summarized financial information, which is the financial results or financial numbers as of June 30th, 2020, as presented in the financial statements. So this first slide looks at the fund balance on the general fund. The general fund is the primary operating fund of the district, and fund balance is essentially represents the amount available to spend and for various purposes, the operations of the district. So looking at this 5-year analysis of the general fund balance, you can see at the end of 2020, you had 1.5 million in unassigned fund balance, 299,000 in assigned fund balance, 1,500 in restricted, and 299,000 in non-spendable. Each of those categories means a slightly different thing and limits how you can spend the money. So the $299,000 represents assets that you have that can't be spent easily or transformed in any way associated with. So items of this nature include prepaid expenses and inventory. Restricted are assets that you have in the general fund that are restricted for use by an external entity. So I believe that the amount, the $1,500, is money that you have for the Common School Grant Fund, which you can only spend in accordance with those grant funds. The $299,000 of assigned fund balance is money that has been earmarked internally for specific purposes. Significant items in that $299,000 includes about $115,000 for buildings and grounds and IT and various capital and non-capital purchases, but there's also a significant amount set aside for future COVID and CARES Act funding. And then the 1.5 million, the unassigned, that represents the amount that you have to spend however you want to support the operations of the district. Any questions about the general fund? Well, we're going to have a little bit more information about the general fund, which is looking a little bit at the liquidity of the fund itself. So The district, all school districts in Wisconsin have a bit of an uneven cash flow cycle because of the timing of property tax and state aid payments. There are some times when a lot of cash comes into the district and times where there aren't. So the district has received back in August the remains of the tax roll for the 1920 school years. But the next major payment that you're going to receive for taxes for the 2021 school year, the current school year, will occur in about a month. And so that is a very long gap in timing for significant cash flow to come into the district. So by having a healthy unassigned fund balance, that can reduce short-term borrowing at districts, which is very common at school districts across the state. I don't believe that Pittsville has needed to resort or rely on short-term funding, which reduces interest expenses, which saves more money for uses on other areas. So a benchmark that we have that kind of gives us a good idea if your unassigned fund balance is in good shape is 20 to 25% of your general fund expenditures. And the district is squeaking into that range on the lower end of the range, but it's still in that range. Part of the reason that you're at that level is because additional funds were assigned this year compared to other years. And assigned funds are just internally earmarked funds for specific purposes. So if we go to the next slide, we can see that a 5-year graph of where you stand in that 20 to 25% range of unassigned fund balance in accordance with expenditures. And for the last 5 years, you've been in that range. Like I said, 2020 is a bit lower compared to the other years, but you're still in that healthy range of that we like to see districts in. Then one more slide, I believe there is. And while I mentioned that the general fund is the main operating fund of the district, you do have other funds for various purposes. So the donations fund is for money that people have donated to the district for specific purposes to offset costs for whatever the district needs. Food service fund is for food service purposes. Community service, that's your fund 80. That's for services that benefit the community. Non-referendum and referendum debt service, that's for future debt service. You can see that the referendum approved debt service has a balance of $236,500. That was for the referendum debt for your new CTE building that was issued in the prior year. You might see a little bit of a difference in fund balance in that fund from the records that Pam gave you to the financial statements, just because DPI requires a little bit of a different reporting element of that balance, but it should clear itself out at the end of 2021, and we shouldn't have an issue there. And the other item is the other capital projects fund, which represents the amount of unspent proceeds that you had associated with your upcoming project, which I hope to be able to tour next year. So that was the extent of my presentation. John Troutman, who's the principal on engagement, and my contact information is on this slide, this page. So if you have any questions throughout the year, please reach out. We're here to help the district in any way we can. And at this time, if there's any questions, I'll do my best to help.
Does anyone have any questions? Okay, thank you, Stuart.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Stuart. Have a good night.
You too.
Okay, we do not need a motion to approve that, correct?
Actually, I believe we should accept the report on the audit, so let's have a motion.
Okay, I will entertain a motion to accept the presentation of the 2019-2020 audit.
I'll make that motion. This is Jane.
I'll second. This is Connie.
Any discussion? Roll call vote, please, Connie?
Nate. Yes.
Mandy.
Yes.
Jane.
Yes.
Bob.
Yes.
Connie, yes.
Okay, motion carried. Next, we'll move on to the administrative reports, starting with the high school principal.
Hi, good evening. This is Cynthia Porter. And the piece of the administrative report for the high school that I'm going to discuss is from the second bullet, innovation and recognition. And I wanted just to give a shout out to the amazing staff at the high school. We recently operated for an entire day with only half of our faculty present, and it was done successfully. This is possible because everyone is operating as a team, doing the right work, communicating completely, offering to cover classes and help each other, and being adaptable in each situation. Teachers met virtually with the students who were in school. So the teachers who were not in the building were able to still teach from their location and meet with their students in their classrooms. And they continued to deliver content. Attendance was taken using our agreed upon system of Google Forms. Content was planned and available through our Google Classrooms, and students could listen to pre-recorded instruction from teachers who were not physically present in the building, as well as being available through Google Meets. And we managed to spread students out and to ensure the physical distancing was still maintained. All of that with 9 staff missing from our high school. And in the building at any time, there's only 16 because the other 3 are across the street. So that's what I wanted to highlight. Any questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Next is the elementary school principal.
All right. Hi, this is Heather Friday. I would like to just summarize the elementary school learning objectives for the school year. So I have 100% of students in grades 2 through 8 will show growth in reading and math and score in the 26th percentile or higher as reported in Ames Web assessments. And then 100% of students in grades K through 1 will be proficient as reported in our PALS literacy assessment. I did include the data from both of the fall assessments. And then just to summarize, every year the staff tries to analyze every area, but always trying to improve in math and literacy. And so I just wanted to summarize a little bit of some of the things that we have in place that we're continuing and things that are new. So this year we did purchase the units of study instructional videos for reading, writing, and phonics at grades K through 3, which helps reach the distance learners and helps model for the teachers. Kindergarten this year is implementing Lucy Calkins reading and phonics. And then that would bring us to a continuation of units of study in reading and writing for grades K through 7. And again, as Taylor showed you today, it's just that the kids can continue to have the same language, the same vocabulary, and they're building on skills from the prior year. So that's very exciting for Lucy Calkins. And then we have co-teaching ELA in grade 5. And then all teachers are still participating in our peer-to-peer coaching professional development, which they talk about lessons, they do reflections to continue to improve. And then grades K through 3, again, consistent implementation of running records to document reading growth. And then for math, we increased math minutes for grades 4, 5, 6, and 8. The only reason that we didn't do 7th grade is that it's connected to the high school schedule, so we didn't have flexibility. So we have gone from 42 minutes to 55 minutes each day. We were able to provide 6th grade their own intervention time this year. And then we continue to use our online resources for intervention and different grade levels. And then the high school special education teacher is still co-teaching with our junior high teacher when possible in her schedule. And then grades 6 through 8, Mrs. Knudsen has really been working on implementing some skill drill practices to increase our basic math skills in our students. So any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Next is the technology updates.
Chris has a junior high or middle school basketball game tonight. So he just got back to work late last week after having been out for an extended period. So he's getting caught up on all those things. We did just renew our Khajiit data plan, so to make sure that we can continue to provide those hotspots for our families that need those. And we are looking at the network expansion costs into the CTE edition. So we will be using monies from the Teach Information Technology Infrastructure Grant. We are going to get a discount, an E-rate discount of about $9,500. So we're looking at a balance of about $17,259.58. But we do have $30,000 available in infrastructure grant funds to cover that. So, so this has all been part of our planning all along to be able to, obviously we're going to have the state-of-the-art CTE facility, and we're also going to have state-of-the-art technology service in there. So, so that's what Chris asked me to share with the board tonight.
Okay, thank you. Next is the maintenance report.
All right, can anybody hear me?
We can.
It is working? Great. Hey, I'm just going to touch on the one I don't really get to talk about very much, and that's our football field. This time of year, you usually don't hear anything about that, but unfortunately, our football season got cut short this year, but it did give us an opportunity to do a little bit of work on the field this year for the kids. What we've noticed is in the last couple of years that it's starting to wear down a little bit. We're getting some high and low spots. So I did some research on it, and we came up with what's called top dressing. What you do is you bring in a field mix and you put it across the whole top of the field after you aerate everything. And that in itself was a little bit of a challenge because we had a hard time finding somebody who had equipment that was big enough that could go out there without actually wrecking anything else while they were out there. So Wilkie was able to help us with that. And what that top dressing does is it'll fill in all those high and low spots. And then also, while we had them out there, we had them put down more seed to help bring it in and promote new growth next year, because that stuff won't start growing until the weather gets above 50 degrees again. So come next football season, we're hoping that we have a nice comfortable field to be on again, and we don't have those low spots. We'll do some rolling on stuff like that, but it just makes me want to be outside more. So any questions on any of the other stuff that's going on?
No, thank you.
If not, that's it. Thanks.
Thanks, Ken. Next is the Director of Special Education.
So despite a lack of English proficiency, our English learners must have access to grade level curriculum and meaningfully and equally participate in all aspects of learning. So with the addition of Andrea Galvan to our staff, we have been able to provide full access to grade level curriculum for our EL students, develop rapport with our families, and provide more efficient needs for our EL families. So I want to thank the board for bringing Andrea on last year. She has definitely been a huge asset to our team. Any questions?
No, thank you, Matt. Next is the Director of Childcare.
I just wanted to talk a little bit about that. We opened up our toddler room officially on the 7th of December. So that's been a great thing for our childcare center that allowed us to open up a lot of spaces within our infant room. And we're currently filling up. We still have about one more full-time enrollment in that room. Otherwise, the start of next year and into the summer, we should be filling up, and that room should be all booked up with kids. And we've just been doing a lot more fun things with those toddlers. They've been pretty busy. And also just want to say that we hired another non-lead teacher who will be starting with us next week. So any questions on anything else I had?
No, thank you. Okay, I will entertain a motion to approve the administrative reports.
This is Connie. I'll make a motion to approve the administrative reports.
Second.
This is Jane. I'll second that.
Okay, roll call vote, please, Connie.
Nate,
Yes.
Mandy,
Yes.
Jane,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Connie, yes.
Okay, motion carried. Next is the state school board convention update.
So as we get closer to the school board, our hopes of being able to do a small regional type in-person meeting with other districts, those opportunities I would say are probably not going to happen. Basically, with the community spread that we've experienced over the last 5 or 6 weeks and all the different things schools are trying to do, at this point, we're going to be on our own for our meeting. So I would like, obviously, still like the board to participate, and I'd like us to be able to separate that time if at all possible. And as far as like location, we are looking to set aside a space here within the school building where we can get together. We'll bring earphones. We can do our separate sessions, and then we can get together and we can have conversations about those sessions as a board. So as far as like the location of that meeting yet, that'll be determined. We'll determine that sometime in January. The actual convention is 20th through the 22nd of January. So we'll have another board meeting prior to establishing our site. If anybody, I'm sorry, Andy, if anybody is considering not attending, I would need you to let me know because we will be doing registrations very soon. And so we'll need to know who are all going to register. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next is the COVID-19 update.
Okay, so everybody knows we have a COVID dashboard on our website. Deb keeps that up each day. She updates it with our most current information. We do not keep a cumulative running total. What we keep on there is we keep the current numbers at the end of each day. So we have had a couple very interesting previous weeks. And what I would like to do is I provided a small presentation. Deb, if you could pop that up. It's related to where we are right now in our decision-making process. So dated for today. So just to go back in time about 2.5 weeks, go back to the week of November 30th. That was the first week or the first day after Thanksgiving break. So the district had approached and surpassed 1% of our total school population being positive for COVID-19 by Friday afternoon. When I left that day, we were at 1.19%, 0.2% above the safest level per CDC guidelines. So even though that was the highest we'd ever been, it was still a relatively low count. This is also our first full week after Thanksgiving. Of course, anybody that watched the news or listened to the radio or watched TV, you knew that was the big concern, is what was going to happen when Americans had, in Wisconsin, especially deer hunting season and Thanksgiving. So for close contact data, so Pittsville has not had a positive case of COVID-19 develop from a close contact of a positive in school unless the close contact was a household member of a positive case. What that's saying is that we have not had a start of a community spread within our district, okay, within the school buildings. So we are currently using the CDC's guidance for close contacts with school exclusion for 14 days post last contact with a positive case. We will be discussing that a little bit later. The CDC did offer shortened quarantine data, and we had that later in the agenda. So here's the actual numbers. So we already talked about the week of November 30th. So the next week would have been the week of December 7th. We had 13 positive students and staff total, which ended up being about 2.2%. For us, if you get around that 2.5%, and we have to look really hard at what we have for staffing. Dr. Porter alluded to the fact that she did go one day last week where she had 50% of her staff available and they were able to make it work. Now that's not a long-term solution, but as a short-term solution, it was able to work. So we were able to continue staffing. Starting this week, we have 2 positive cases, and that would be of all students and staff. So drastic reduction based on a lot of the positives. Now, Many of the positives that we report as the 13, which is why we didn't have to close, were positives of they were close contacts of positives within their household. So we still have to count those in our number, but those kids were not in the school building during a contagious period. So that kept our number of close contacts down. And then the data on the bottom shows for the week of 12/7, there were 34 close contacts, so about 5.3% of the total pop. And this week starting, we had 32 close contacts, which is about 5% of the total pop. Of note, we will have a large group of close contact individuals back in the district tomorrow. They are still counted in this 32, but they will be coming back, and that's 5% number is going to drop down to about 2 to 2.3%. So notices are always sent out whenever you get a case. We need to notify the public that we do have positive students. Some more data. CISA 5, 35 districts were represented in the data. So 8 of the 35 districts are currently in either 90 to 100% virtual or distance instruction. So they are educating virtually all of their students off-site. 21 of the districts have had to change their operation plan due to COVID infection and close contacts rates, but almost all of them, actually all of them, had to do it due to the inability to have enough staff to teach. So they had too many staff out to be able to run their schools. They couldn't manage it. 14 have been able to maintain, our initial opening plans, which includes hybrid and full attendance models. So there are about, I don't have that in front of me. I think there were 4 districts that were in full attendance. So, and that's part of that 14, and they were able to maintain, so they didn't have to go into a closure. In Pittsville, we offered 4K through 5 full in-person attendance and 6 through 12 cohort 2-day in-person attendance since the start of the school year. Families can choose the full distance option if they have health concerns or they don't feel safe sending their children to school. That has been our stance since we started, and so we're able to offer that to our families. So the numbers in current 100% distance learning. So in 4K through 8, it's 38 of 367 students, so about 10.4%. And then in high school, 25 of 176, so 14.2%. So all grades would be about 11.6%. Our initial estimate coming into the school year was somewhere between 10 and 15%. So we're in that range. Now, some data regarding grading, earned grades. So we've been looking at data. Obviously, we want to make sure that we want kids to be as successful as possible. The teachers are working really hard to improve engagement, learning, but you're limited. All right. So last week when we went through and we ran the reports, 6th through 8th grade cohort, kids in the cohort model in 6th through 8th, these would be students with at least a grade of a D. So that would be they have at least 1 D, or they have more than 1 D, or they have failing grades. In the 6th grade, out of 44 students, 28 of them had at least 1 D or worse, so 63.6%. 7th grade, 22 of 32, that's our small class, so that's 68.8%. And then the 8th grade, 26 of 45, so 57.8%. Now, of course, there's no names attached to this because that would not be the right way to display the data, but this is not due to lack of effort on instructors reaching out. And we have some kids that are doing phenomenal in this structure too, but so lots of things are in place. Communication is set up. When messages are sent to students, they're also sent to parents. So all of those things were done. In the 9-12 grade cohort model for the report summary, now this is not by grade level, but so this is from term 1. We had 30 students that earned at least 1 failing grade. Now, obviously, they're earning credits for graduation. A failing grade would be non-credit. They wouldn't earn credit. Out of that group, 7 of the 30, 100% of them were distance learning. So 7 of those were in full distance learning. 2 of them in the cohort failed all of their courses, 2 of the 30. 3 of the 30 failed 1 class. 2 of the 30 transferred out. Let's see the bottom here. And 5 of the 30 are new to Pittsville this fall. In the 9-12 just distance learning students, At the end of term 1, we had 20 students in distance learning. 7 of the 20 students in distance were on the honor roll. 7 of 20 failed at least one course. 13 of 20 passed all courses. 2 of 20 had perfect attendance, and 2 of 20 failed all courses in distance. So based on the number of students in grades 6 through 12 struggling academically, the school's proven ability to keep infection from spreading on site, the low infection rate in the lowest safest CDC levels of less than 1%, the need to address student social and emotional concerns, access to a middle school counselor and mental health grant, and through the mental health grant, and a part-time social worker completing internship on site. We have those 2 resources this year for sure. We don't know if we're going to have them after this year. Concerns around the adolescent risk behaviors, which involve alcohol, drugs, tobacco products, and sexuality. So those were things that were brought up in several of our county meetings. Gaps created by the lack of school structure, access to broadband and equitable technology in the home. We have a strong school county health department communication and partnership, and the ability of families, the ability of us, of the school district, to be able to adjust if needed in the best interest of our students, staff, and families. So that is our rationales. Schools will forever be changed from this experience, but the majority of students benefit most from having face-to-face instruction and the expected level of personal accountability from someone other than a parent helping them learn. Based on this information, the data we've been collecting, I would recommend to the board that they approve 5-day-a-week student attendance for all students in all grades. So that would be adding grades 6 through 12 to begin Monday, January 18th, 2021. There are other details to be worked out. This would be full regular 5-day on-site attendance. We'd still have 100% distance learning, but those are going to be the only available options. So we'll enforce the attendance policies. The second semester start is going to provide us time to determine whether a Christmas holiday spike will impact school cases. Which is a possibility, but be aware, with all the students in grades 6 through 12 attending in person, the 6-foot recommended social distancing will not be possible in every area. So we will space them out as much as possible, but it's not realistic to say we're going to be able to keep them all 6 feet apart. Face coverings are going to continue to be required when in the school buildings or participating in school activities. In the event there's a significant community spread in the week preceding January 18th, the district will continue in our current plan for 1 additional week and then reevaluate for the next week. Keeping our schools open and as safe as possible will continue to depend on our families being aware of the health of all household members. Pittsville staff and families have done an outstanding job with few exceptions. We are having conversations and investigating ways to address the gaps created over the last 9 months. This is a priority we will be able to address sooner than later by safely getting all of our kids back in our buildings. One thing that I think is apparent, everybody's busy listening to all the difficulties of kids trying to learn in a virtual setting. But the one thing that I think has not been talked about enough is the true value of having those educators there in front of those kids, working with those kids versus being in distance. So they are a super important piece of their children's growth and development. And the challenges of COVID, I think, have brought light to this fact. So again, my recommendation for the board to consider would be approving bringing all of our students back to full-time attendance beginning the start of the second semester, which is January 18th. And if you have questions, now would be a great time to ask them.
Anyone who has questions or comments, now's the time.
I have a couple of questions about the proposal. First of all, how come, is there nothing that can be done between now and when you want to implement the plan to come up with some more creative ideas to keep the social distancing more for the kids, especially the bigger kids? Because I completely agree that the kids are safer in school, and they're actually probably safer in school even if they would say get exposed to this COVID, which seems to hit kids not very hard at all. But the amount of disruption that goes into their lives and the family lives if we obtain a close contact, which we've been very good about enforcing and pointing out. But it seems even if we stayed at our current percent, that it would just be logical that the amount of kids we have in quarantine is going to double, wouldn't it, if we bring everybody back?
So that is a possibility. And, obviously you bring in the bigger kids into the area they're currently in, there's going to be more close contacts. But the thing to remember too is when the kids are not in school, many of our students are still hanging out together. And when they're hanging out, they're probably not wearing face coverings. And they're probably not worried about some of the other things, being conscious of where they are in relation to where somebody else is. So yes, it could increase the number of close contacts. Yes, it's highly disruptive. But the other thing that is proven, I think, is that wearing the face coverings in the school, I think, is one of the biggest factors to, even in our 4K through 5th grade who are here 100%, why we haven't had a close contact in school outside of a household member actually contract COVID. Now, we do have some examples, and again, we'll talk about this later when we talk about some of the CDC things, but shortening the quarantine timelines. There are some relevant statistics to exposure or becoming positive after day 7 and after day 10, which we'd have to consider because we would have 2 that we currently would have had as close contacts that didn't become positive till later in their quarantine that would have been here for 1 or possibly 2 days if they would have come out of quarantine earlier. So those are decisions we have to make later when we talk about this. But the masking, when the kids walk in the hall, passing time, just so the things that we're going to do. So we're looking at lunches. We're looking at any possible thing we can do, to be able to bring kids in as safe as possible. But like I said, their needs right now are definitely, they're pretty substantial. And and the longer we wait to address those, I think, the more kids we're going to have to bring back from further away.
I've got a question. Rod, have you checked any of the schools that have had full-time since the beginning with your data that you have presented to us in respect to their grades, their attendance, and other issues?
Yes. So we have 2 districts around us. So Auburndale and Port Edwards are both in full attendance. They both have had some struggles. Port Edwards did have to close for a short period of time to get their arms around something that had kind of gotten a little bit out of their control. But then they were able to reopen and they're running and they're doing good. Statistically, very similar. Auburndale, same thing. It's the adjustment to what the new normal attendance would be. So we've looked at that data and it's all very similar. So Auburndale has not had to shut down. Port Edwards did have to shut down for 1 week or possibly 6 days, something like that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Nate, you had another question too, I think.
I was wondering with the students we have historical data on, the people that are failing that have been with us for the past year, how many of this sort of academic struggles is new? Like how much of this has come upon somebody that wouldn't have experienced this without COVID?
That's a great question. So when we looked at this, and this is what's alarming, and I get to look at the list and I get to see the names and the principals, they have more intimate knowledge of how these learners are in their buildings. And there are individuals on the list that you would never expect to see them on the list. Now, to your point, even when we don't have COVID and school's in session, there's still going to be academic challenges for some learners. So we're always going to have learners that are going to have some challenges, whether they're created by them or created by learning disability or created by the environment, created by whatever. This statistically, this is to say this is significant is an understatement. The example I'm going to use, Dr. Porter last year at the high school, I don't know for sure if it was all 4 of her grading periods, but I know at least 1, possibly 2, they may not have had a single failing grade. They may not have had a single student fail in one of the terms. We just completed the first term at the high school and we had 30 kids that got 1 or more failing grade. So, there are many, many issues. One, of course, isn't one that just children struggle with. It's procrastination. We have adults that wait till the last minute to do things. Well, guess what? We have kids that do the same thing. So, but when they're in school every day and they have that contact with their educator, or they're engaging every day like they're supposed to, it's just a built-in level of accountability that's just difficult to duplicate when a kid is virtual every day.
Is there a way or a plan that if everybody came back, you could look to segregate the kids in some way? The people that are going to be together naturally, whether it's families or, everybody on the wrestling or girls basketball team, things like that. Just because I'm thinking if we have that many kids struggling, but there's equally, if not more, kids doing just fine or great still, right?
Yeah. So if you look at the data, if you look at the high school data, but the data was based on a failing grade. We didn't go as far as to take how many kids were getting at least 1D, which was the data we took at the middle school. And I could run that report, but I suspect that the percentages are going to be pretty consistent.
But do roughly how many kids in the high school are in the honor roll? Quarter? Third?
Cynthia, can you answer that question?
As far as percentage, I couldn't. So the senior class had, I think, roughly high 20s. Junior class had somewhere around 14. The sophomores had low 20s, and the freshmen had maybe 18 or 19. So it was normal.
So, and then as far as if there's a way we could segregate or separate, the challenge is at the high school with the schedule. We're really counting on the kids doing what we're asking them to do, because we can't take a kid out of a class because their bus riders or their family or other people, you understand what I'm saying, or their teammates are in that or not in that. I mean, we can certainly, that's a good thing to look at to see if there's some things we could do, but I'm not sure that that's gonna be a major thing that we're gonna be able to do that's gonna impact that.
But families will still have the virtual option if we go this way, right?
That's correct. Yep. So we do have a number of children and family members of children who have compromised immune system, different illnesses, and we want to make sure that they are aware that we're going to support them every way we can. Nobody's going to be forced to come in 100% attendance. We have had some students that we've encouraged very aggressively to come in for different remediation things that Dr. Porter and Heather have put in place. And for the most part, the response has been pretty good, but we still have some learners and some parents who just, they have not taken advantage of it.
In general, has the majority of our quarantines been sports related? From what I'm gathering, a lot of our people or kids that have been in quarantine have been because of sports. So segregating or separating them in the classroom isn't really going to be impactful in that instance. Is in general, have more of the quarantines and more of the exposures or close contacts been because of sporting things rather than in the classroom? And would we expect that to continue if we brought everybody back?
So the numbers, if we took them, and I didn't break them down like that, but what happens when we get a bump in numbers, generally that's when we get somebody on a sport team that became positive. But if you probably just looked at close contacts from within the school community, and over time it would be pretty steady. But the bump, when you do get a bump, it could be the football team, the basketball team, the wrestling team, so that's part of it. And we have had a few staff that, it takes a little bit to get used to not being in that close proximity with kids, because it's just very personal, but they are making adjustments so that they wouldn't necessarily be close contacts when the kids are there. They can help them without being right next to them, but they can help them better still being in front of them. So Mandy, I don't have any actual numbers I could give you like right now off the top of my head, but like I said, but you're right. When we've had a positive on a sports team, that has definitely caused a bump. And you think about football, that could have been 20 kids. You think about basketball, same thing, could be 15 kids. Think about wrestling, and then that also means the coaches, and so that's all part of it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Rod, have we kept a running total of the positive cases, the confirmed positive? I know we have the daily, but from the beginning, have we kept a running total to have like a percentage of our student population?
So we do have a couple spreadsheets with that data. So we can see who was positive, who were close contacts, how many times they were close contacts, if they were a household member, if they weren't, if they were we do have that data. I couldn't tell you percentage-wise what percent of our students have been positive, if that's what you're asking, but I could find that out.
That's what I was wondering. I was just curious what that number might be as far as, where we would be bringing them all back together.
Yeah, that's something I can take a look at the spreadsheet and I could calculate that.
I think it's worth restating. I know that most of us, or many of us, know kids that are in school, high schools in specific, and we know that they're getting together outside of school. They're getting together on their cohort off or virtual days to do school together, and probably not being as safe as they would have to be at school. So for me, it makes total sense to have those kids in a more structured environment. For a lot of reasons, I think that it's really important that they're all getting the social and mental health needs that they have met, but also their academic needs. And in doing so, if we can make it a little bit safer for them to be at school versus at someone's house having a get together to have virtual school together, maybe this is the best choice. I know that you all kind of have an idea that I've been pushing for this for a while, and I think that it's a reasonable and safe way, and I think that it makes sense to me, all of the reasons that Fig laid out as to why we should bring them back.
This is Bob.
Andy said, I am also in favor of having all kids at school.
Okay, I'm just seconding what Mandy just said. This is Bob. And I agree totally with it, that the kids, when they walk by my house, they are not socially distanced. And you can see the minute they get out of school, they come by and they're with their friends immediately, Mandy. So it just has to be back. I, as a teacher, see very strong situations. I've got a son that's a teacher. I've got all my grandchildren in either full-time or cohort or not in. And all of them have said full-time is the way to go.
Nate, Jane, anything to add?
I just want to add that I do agree that I think we should bring them back. But I think it kind of leads into the next discussion a little bit, because some of the some of the feedback I've heard, and it's not been like complaining about our processes or anything like that. It's just people kind of lamenting and sympathizing, which is not something I've had to go through in the same terms as other people have. But I know some of our families have had their kids quarantined 14 days 3 times. And that is a huge, huge problem. And we're going to bring everybody back. And I think it's a great idea. I mean, we're going to vote on it, obviously. But I think it's a wonderful idea. And I do believe the kids are safer here as a whole, and they're better off to get educated here than they are what we're kind of how we're set up now. And how we're set up now is to keep them safe. So it's not like it wasn't like it was bad, or there's nothing wrong with that plan either. But I think before we vote on this, are we going to talk about the other item? Is that the plan?
So the CDC recommendations?
Yes.
So we have that as a separate thing that we're going to talk about a little bit later, but we can certainly talk about that now too. So Jane, did you want to weigh in, or do you want to wait till we're done talking about that?
I just wanted to express that I appreciate the timing. It will be more than 14 days past the holidays before you open up to full. And I think the timing is good.
So that ends up being kind of a natural place. There are pretty significant logistics issues, mostly in the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade for scheduling with electives and core classes versus what we're doing right now. And then of course we're also asking, the 6th through 12th grade to be nimble enough that if we need to, it'd be great to not have to fully shut down. But, so we need to have some flexibility to be able to pivot if we need to without having to completely close. So to Nate's, we were going to talk about this later. We can talk about this right now real quick, but the CDC changes came out, and, the week they came out, we had several meetings, state level and county level meetings. Basically, what the CDC came out now with the recommendations, and they were very clear that this was more due to the political pressures of the 14-day quarantine for people. To Nate's point, you get your kids in school, and we have some families that literally have been on a 14-day quarantine 3 times this year because they were close contacts to somebody that was positive. So what the CDC did is they offered 2 shortened versions of the quarantine, and they do have some pretty strict things. Now, first, the CDC does still say the 14-day is the best. Okay, they are offering you can come out of the quarantine early after day 7 if you're a close contact and you're asymptomatic. If you get a negative COVID test in days 5 or 6, you can come back on day 8. But one of the contingencies is anytime you're outside of your household, you're supposed to wear a face covering, and you are supposed to be socially distanced all the time. Okay. The other one is coming out after 10 days with no test, and so you come back on day 11. Now, statistically, what they came back with on the numbers, if you come back on day 8, you have a 5 to 12% chance to become positive COVID yet as a close contact. Okay. If you come out on day 11, you have a 1 to 10% chance to become COVID positive. So it's under 1% if you go out to 14 days, which is, I'm sure, where they came out with that recommendation to begin with. So you have employers that want to get their employees back sooner. You have parents who want to get kids back in school sooner. We have fought hard to maintain the right things so that we don't unnecessarily risk our staff, their health, which is a big deal, because if we don't have enough staff, we won't be able to stay open. And that's a big part of it. Almost all of the schools that have had to close have been because of lack of staff, not number of infections from kids. Okay. So what happened at our county level is the other 5 school districts said that they talked to their people that do their contact tracing, and they said, they just don't want to deal with the backlash of not doing exactly what the CDC is doing. Well, since that time, what's come out is that, that means that the people are saying they're going to face cover every time they're out of their house. not just when they're in school, but every time they're out of their house. People are going to social distance 6 feet or more every time they're out in early quarantine, and they're going to keep track of do whatever checks they have to do for either the 7 days they're out early or the 4 days they're out early. So they're looking at that now, and it's actually, there's a fair amount of additional record keeping that's got to be done to do that. So what I would like us to be able to do, especially since our county is doing it, if it turns out that 10 days ends up being that 1% or less of people getting positive, that's probably doable. But I would like to be able to use the data from the schools that have decided they're just going to do what they're saying, look at how things go before we would just say, yeah, we're going to throw 14 days out and just do the shortened ones. Because now, so 2 weeks ago, we had eight kids become positive. Out of that group of 8, there were 2 of them, there were more than 2. I think there were 6 household members, but out of those household members, 2 of them would have been able to come back on day 11 and day 12 because they had not had symptoms yet. But on day 11 and day 12, they were symptomatic, and then they ended up testing positive. So we would have had those 2 children, we would have had them back in school. One would have been there for maybe a day, one would have been there for a day and a half or 2 days before they had symptoms, and then they ended up being positive, and they were close contacts of a positive. So those are things that, there should be some good data for us to revisit if we want to look at it in January. I think as a board, I think that I'm looking at our numbers every day. I'm looking at our county stuff every day. I'm looking at our state stuff every day, and so we can make some decisions. Because it sounds like everybody here agrees that the safest place for our kids is here. But on the same token, we need to be able to do this in as safe as possible. So, if it turns out that those shortened periods, are minimal risk, additional risk, I think it'll be easiest for us to make a decision. Clark County, the day after the Wood County districts, other than us, said they were definitely going to go to that. Clark County Human Services contacted us and said, just so you know, they met with their school districts and they all decided that they're going to stay with the CDC recommendation of 14 days. And there's going to be plenty of data from not just our county, but all around the state for this for schools. So what I would encourage the board to do is to support us, staying where we're at right now, and then being able to look back and see what the data looks like from Wisconsin Rapids and Marshfield and Port Edwards and our area districts.
Did all those other districts apply that already, like last week?
Yes.
So there will be a whole month's worth of a sample size, plus
Correct.
after Christmas time. I guess my main point in wanting to talk about them together is because I'm kind of the mind. I think if we have everybody come back, I think it almost seems to me logical that we have to go with the new, unless some data just explodes these cases in these other schools, for a couple of reasons. Because I think it's going to become very problematic when the county's giving all these people sheets. This is when you can go back, and they're going to be waving it in everybody's faces. But aside from that, if we're going to say what we've been doing is working, here's our data to prove how great we've done. So we can't change this quarantine time, even though the CDC and the health department say it's okay. And I asked my child's doctor today, and he was for it. I was a little surprised, but so and that I'm not a doctor, but but he was for it. But then we change how we're we change our cohort model and all that. So I just worry that it's going to look or not add up in a lot of people's minds, because I've had a hard time thinking about this over the last couple of weeks, because I try to get outside of myself personally, because for me personally, me and my entire family could be home. We could have stayed home for 2 months and nobody had been worse than wear. Our kids still would have been fine. I could have kept working, but I realize I'm the minority of the people in our district. A lot of other people have a lot of other struggles that go along with having to, quarantine over and over and over again. And I think if we bring more people back, this would be like a way to hopefully provide them some relief if it turns out to be safe.
Which is why I really do think, and something that we're losing in this conversation too is, we've been pretty fortunate in Pittsville that we haven't had a high number of people have severe, really severe reactions. We have had some. And, we haven't had a COVID-related death that I'm aware of in our greater community either, but they're happening. I mean, everybody can see the numbers. So I also don't want to lose sight that we still want to try to do this in as safe a way as possible. And, and the counterpoint, Nate, to the, if we're going to bring everybody back, the counterpoint to not jumping immediately on the CDC recommendation, and they're not recommendations, they're changes. The CDC recommendation is still 14 days, but they're allowing the changes of the 7 days and the 10 days. And as long as we don't do less than that, we're okay, but we are always allowed to do more. And this is actually a little bit in a similar vein to our conversation in summer when we were debating face coverings, about requiring face coverings. And I'm just really, really glad that the board erred on the side of caution, because that's been one of the things that I think has kept a lot of people, even when they're identified as close contacts, from getting an infection from somebody here in school. So I know that's a couple different things, but I mean, this is something that, some of you have more intimate experience with this than I do. But the CDC recommendations, I think my peers, even in the county, they're thinking more about the pushback from the community, from their parents, than they're thinking about what's going to happen in their schools. And I can tell you that, the other districts around us have struggled when they started out, because maybe they weren't all following the same protocol that we said we were going to do. So I know that was the case. And then they had some surges, and then this school had to close, or that elementary had to close, or they had an outbreak, or they had a community spread within a whole grade, or things like that. So anyway, that's my personal feeling, my professional feeling looking at this is that, we would be wise to be able to look at the data before we would just decide to adopt any shortened quarantine periods.
Do you think, could you quickly, and if you can't, we could, maybe pull it together and talk about the next meeting, because I'm certainly not opposed to waiting and looking at the data. I think that's very, very reasonable. But so now that the county differs from our policy, because we're going to, we'll talk about it, but if we stay with our policy, how does that look for the people that are tracking it? We're just going to keep tracking it the same way. We get told when someone tested, we take that as a start date and we do our own math as far as when the kids come back versus what everybody's, because when you test positive, you get a sheet from your healthcare provider saying when you can come out of quarantine. So when that sheet from the county doesn't match our records, how are we keeping track of that? And is there any fear of we're keeping kids out of school, we're not allowing kids to come to school sort of litigation?
So they did talk about that at our WASA meeting, and they said that is not a concern at this time. As far as the record keeping, we as a school district are getting out the close contact letters when there's a positive case and an exposure. We are submitting those to the county so they have our records. So we give them a copy of our Excel sheet so they know who we have, when they were, if they were close contact, a positive, when they can come out of quarantine. So it's on the record keeping on our side, yes, and we've already had some calls and some contacts from some parents that wanted to have their kids out of quarantine sooner. And again, the CDC recommendation is still the 14 days until we have some data that shows us that we could do it the other way. I just assume take those calls and explain that to the parents. Now, like I said, we get a month of data, we're gonna know if it's doable or not. So Auburndale and Port Edwards, both of those districts in the county, they adopted the new CDC standards. So I didn't get a chance. We had another meeting this morning, but it was with Department of Human Services. So we didn't get into the other stuff. We didn't get into that part of the discussion, but I do talk to both of those superintendents a couple times a week. So they're in full attendance and they both adopted the CDC guidelines. So we're going to get some some pretty relevant data. Both those districts are really kind of between what our enrollment are, very similar communities.
But you don't feel this is going to create a lot of extra work for anybody at the school for trying to track two different timelines?
I talked with Mary Lou Mazans at the elementary office. She's working as our health advisor really for the district. And she said that that will not be an issue.
Realistically, we'll have enough data before we bring all the kids back to discuss this at our next meeting, correct? So we could change this if we have that data before all of our kids are back in school, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
And that was one thing I was looking at is we have how many school days before we go on Christmas break?
We have 7 more days starting.
7 more days. So if someone had to quarantine tomorrow, they would go straight into Christmas break. So that would not really affect us. And then when we come back from Christmas break, we have, what, 5, 6? How many days before we have our next meeting? Is the 11th?
Third that Monday. Is that what Monday is? Is January 3rd?
I don't know.
I think it's the
Fourth?
4th.
The 4th is Monday.
Okay, so we have the 4th, and then the 18th would be the start of the second semester.
Sure, but we would have a board meeting on the 11th where we would discuss it again. So
Correct.
that again would be 5 days of school, 7 days of school. We come back on the 4th and the meeting's on the 11th. So that would be 5 days of school. And I'm just looking at, as far as quarantining from school and following, tracking, will they notify you if someone is positive over Christmas break?
Yes. 7 days a week. Yep.
So I'm just looking at going into Christmas break, we've got 7 days. So if someone was positive tomorrow, and whether it was 7, 10, or 14 days quarantine, it's not going to affect school, correct? And then coming back, I mean, it might on the other end possibly, but it would just be a 5 days of school that it would affect.
Yeah, I think that any change to anything now would be anybody that's quarantined now that wanted to come back sooner.
I didn't hear you, Nate.
I just said I think the main change now would be anybody that's in quarantine that could maybe come back before Christmas instead of waiting till after.
I see what you're saying.
Okay, any other thoughts? Any other questions?
There are really 2 things there, right? So one
Right,
is
so let's address the bringing the kids back at the January 18 first. We'll address that first, and then we'll do the other.
So does that need to be a motion?
It will be, yes.
I'd like to make that motion to bring the kids back on the 18th or look into it further or whatever we need to do.
This is Nate, I'll second.
Any further discussion? Let's roll call vote, please, Connie.
Nate,
Yes.
Mandy,
Yes.
Jane,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Connie, yes.
Motion carried. Do we want to do these in order, or do you want to do the CDC changes right now, Fig?
why don't you go ahead and do the CDC changes, because the vaccination planning, just letting you know where we're at with it, so.
Okay. So do you want to have further discussion on the CDC changes? I didn't hear everyone weigh in on that. Jane, do you have comments, opinions on the CDC changes as of right now?
I would favor studying the data for the next month and making our decision from there.
I would say same. I would look at the data for next month and we have time to make that change. And as Connie brought up, she said there's going to be a different spread involved here. So we may have some very different type data being presented at the time too. At this point, however, for my personal opinion, I'm leaning more towards the 14-day.
Okay, I do recognize that the 14-day quarantines are very difficult on families. I recognize that it's not easy on employees. I fully am aware of that. I would be in a world of hurt if I had to deal with it also. So we recognize that it is an issue, but I do agree that having some data to rely on instead of just, here we go, let's try it. I think that it's probably the smart decision. It may not be my gut reaction, but it's probably the smart decision. Do we have any further any further comments? Okay, so I will entertain a motion to keep our quarantine at 14 days for close contact, if that is what we support.
This is Jane. I will make that motion.
Sir, I second. This is Nate. I second.
Okay, any further discussion? Roll call, please, Connie.
Nate,
Yes.
Mandy,
Yes.
Jane,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Connie, yes.
Motion carried. Next is Wood County vaccination site planning.
There is actually one other thing yet. And
Sorry.
That's okay. It's also in the COVID update. Pam has spent a lot of time researching and verifying different things for the Emergency Family Medical Leave Act, FERPA, not FERPA. I can't think of all the different stuff we have here. There's like 4 or 5 of them. Anyway, to make sure that our employees are properly covered or taken care of, and the guidelines are being followed as per the federal government. So anyway, Pam, if you want to take it from here.
Sure. First, I want to kind of just give a thumbnail kind of view on what was offered through the Family First Coronavirus Response Act. There is 2 things that applied to our school districts specifically, or to all school districts. There's an Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act and an Emergency Family and Medical Leave Expansion Act. So in the Emergency Paid Sick Leave, it became effective on on April 2nd, 2020, and will expire on December 31st, 2020. This provides 2 weeks, or in our case, it's a 10-day paid sick leave for qualified reasons at either a full pay or 66% of pay. Qualifying reasons that someone can use this pay is for the employee being subject to a federal, state, or local quarantine, which the school district is considered a local, or an isolation order related to COVID-19. The employee is advised by healthcare providers to self-isolate due to a diagnosis of or other concerns related to COVID-19. The employee is experiencing symptoms of COVID-19 and seeking a medical diagnosis. The employee is caring for an individual who is subject to quarantine or isolation for state, federal, local order, or was advised by a healthcare provider to self-isolate. The employee is caring for their son or daughter because his or her school or place of care has been closed, or his or her child care provider is unavailable due to COVID-19 precautions. We've had several employees that have used the emergency paid sick leave. This is something that can be used intermittently for each case. The Emergency Family Medical Leave Act was effective for the same period from April 2nd through December 31st of 2020. It provides up to 12 work weeks where the first 2 weeks are unpaid and the remaining 10 weeks are paid at not less than 2/3 the employee's usual pay, not to exceed $200 per day. And these 12 work weeks are not exclusive from the traditional Family Medical Leave Act. So if someone had already used, like between January and April 2nd, 12 weeks of paid leave for family medical leave for something, they're not able to use an additional 12 weeks. Qualifying reason, there is only one. This paid leave is solely for those employees who are unable to work or telework virtually due to the need to care for a child due to closures of schools or care providers related to COVID-19 health emergency. We've had 0 employees use this provision. Both the emergency paid sick leave and the emergency family medical leave are set to expire on December 31st, 2020, unless there is a federal extension. Since the emergency paid sick leave has been used by employees, I would like to suggest that we leave the days remaining that each staff member has as of December 31st, 2020, to be available for their use until some point in the future, either March 31st, 2021 or June 30th, 2021. Please note that there will not be a payroll tax credit available to the district for the time used after December 31st. I feel that by having the emergency paid sick leave available will help staff stay home if they are sick. Many of our newer staff don't have many regular sick days accumulated, and I don't want them to hesitate to stay home if they are COVID-19 symptomatic. The district extension of time for using the available emergency paid sick leave days will most likely aid our hourly workers and new teaching staff, as most of the other teaching staff would have an accumulation of regular sick time. And all teachers also have the sick bank to petition if they need it. Since the emergency family medical leave has never been used by an employee, I feel that this portion would not need to be considered for district extension of time. So if you are in agreement that the emergency paid sick leave be allowed to carry forward. So we have a couple employees who've used all of their time. They haven't got any more emergency paid sick time, but there's some people that haven't used it at all. So number one, we would need to determine if the district will allow staff to use their emergency paid sick leave remaining as of December 31st, 2020, after December 31st. If there is not a federal extension of the expiration date. If the district will extend the availability of the emergency paid sick leave remaining days, when will the extension expire? March 31st, 2021 or June 30th, 2021? Are there any questions or comments about any of that?
I have a question. Is this grant money that we've received?
No, it's not grant money at all. This is part of the Families First Coronavirus Act. It is mandated for all public employees. It's mandated. You have to have 10 work days. So if someone is part-time and works 5 hours a day, they would get 10 days times 5. They'd get 50 hours to use. So for all of our full-time people, they get 80 hours to use.
So this comes out of our regular budget money?
Yes, it's out of our regular budget money. For the most part, majority of our hourly workers, we have occasionally that there's a sub that'll cover for them. So it's usually not costing the district really a whole lot of extra money. And from that standpoint, our teaching staff, when they utilize it, they're still able. The only staff that's had to utilize it if they're too sick to virtually teach, or if their job isn't conducive to virtually teaching. You know, like a Phi-Ed type course may not be virtually able to be taught to kindergartners or whatever. So those are really the majority of the uses. The other uses have been by people who are symptomatic, so it takes them, they're feeling badly, they can't work, they're an hourly, like a custodial or food service, they can't work virtually, then they are utilizing it. The district right now, through the end of December, for any days used in December, we get a 6.2% credit on our payroll taxes. That's it for the dollar amount that we pay. So it really, so far, it's only amounted to like less than $100 of credit we've gotten.
If we decide on March, can we push it to June later?
I would say yes. And the only reason why I'm requesting the end of a payroll quarter is because it is the end of the payroll quarter, but there's nothing that says we can't do it on a month by month basis too. If I wouldn't pick a month and just say, on the 20th of this month, that would make my job a nightmare. But if you leave it right at month end each time, I mean, we can evaluate this every month if you choose.
So just so everybody's aware, this is also something that's being talked about at the federal level. So it's, but there's no action has been taken, and it's going to expire the end of this month. But this has been in pretty much every conversation at the federal level, when they're talking about, any type of package moving forward, even though the federal government fiscally isn't very much, there's not a whole lot of fiscal responsibility for the federal government to do this. It's a mandate, more or less, I think you could consider it, because we're absorbing that cost. What they're trying to do is they're trying to preserve, so people don't they don't go into bankruptcy. They can pay their rent, they can buy their groceries, they can do those kinds of things. So yeah. So Pam, like, I agree with what she's saying. I think that the family part of it, we haven't anybody use it. We have, teachers have personal sick time to use unless they haven't been here very long. Same thing with our hourly. So this advantage would be something that we'd be doing for the benefit of our employees. And it has been managed very well. But it is going to cost more money if we do it and we have some people go out. And that's the bottom line.
And I do verify that everyone they're not just saying, yeah, I'm too sick to come to work. They need to provide part of my fiscal responsibility. If I'm audited by the IRS, is I need to have a quarantine letter. I need to have some type of a positive or negative test results. They have to do paperwork if they take the leave. So there is, accountability to the employee for using it as well. No one's abusing it at this point.
Do we have money budgeted to cover that till the end of the year, or till the end of March?
For the most part, it's actually coming. I mean, for the most part, most of the people were not paying extra for sub costs. So it's kind of coming out in the wash right now. Just because we haven't had a lot of people use it. But we have had some people use it 3 times because they may be symptomatic. They go for a test, it's negative, they come back. So they might miss 2 days of work. So we have had a couple people use it 3 times, 2 days each. And I mean, but it's kept them out of the school if they were positive. I mean, 1 positive out of the 3 has happened. So, it's, better to be safe than sorry, I think, by, keeping them out of school when they are symptomatic.
And you're not advocating giving them extra days. It's just whatever hasn't been used.
Correct. No extra days unless the federal law would give them extra days if they extend it. I'm just saying whatever they have left at December 31st, they can keep versus me just turning it off. Otherwise, anybody that has extra days left, it gets turned off on December 31st. So they can't use that anymore as an absent.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any thoughts, any opinions, discussion? Okay, I guess I'll start. I think this is a good idea. I think, especially if it's not costing us a ton of money at this point, it's a benefit to our employees. It's keeping our kids safer. and that's ultimately our goal. So I would say I would be in support of this.
I would be in support of this, but I would wait. I would probably only go through March and reevaluate in March.
So anybody can make a motion if that's a motion that you wanted to make. You could say through, I think it's March 31st. That's the end of that fiscal quarter, right, Pam?
March 31st would be the end of a payroll quarter.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to extend those benefits through March 31st and reassess at that time.
And if the federal government does an extension, then we'd be obligated to do whatever, and then that wouldn't come into play.
Right.
Bob, second the motion.
Any discussion? Okay, let's do a roll call vote, please, Connie.
Nate,
Yes.
Mandy,
Yes.
Jane,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Connie, yes.
Okay, motion carried. Thank you. Now, Wood County vaccination site planning.
So they were just asking, and this is prior to the approval of the current vaccines that were approved and being distributed today. So Marshfield Clinic is going to be our center for the initial vaccination site. And they have their protocol, and healthcare workers and the people most at risk are in that tier 1A. So what they had asked was if there were other areas in the county that might be easy to access, large spaces, if when they get to the point where they're going to maybe be doing more general public vaccinations. So so the early rounds are going to be handled at the clinic. We don't have to take any action right now, but they did inquire if this is something that Pittsville School District would be interested in, providing it would be the varsity gym area because of the entrances, the parking lot, and the space, to possibly be set up as a vaccination center. So then people would be coming here from Wood County, probably mostly southwest Wood County, but would be available for Wood County. However, it's designated to get shots. They did not confirm that it was a yes or no. They're just putting the feelers out to see if people are amenable to something like that, versus if somebody's dead set against it, absolutely not. They'd just like to know that.
Does anyone have any thoughts on this?
Rod, does this interfere with anything that would be athletically internal?
So depending on when the vaccinations would be available for that phase, it could. It would take away that, the varsity gym, that area for our use if we were a vaccination site, say for 3 days or a week, for a couple runs.
How about the auditorium? Would that be a suitable place for vaccination? That would be an easy spacing.
Well, they're looking for easy entry and a large open space, because they'll set up, whatever they need to set up to do the vaccination. So no, the auditorium would not be a good space for them.
Okay.
If we say yes and it interferes with something we have going that particular day, can we tell them no at that point? Like, not today, not this time?
Yeah, just based on what this is about, I would say that's really not an option. We don't have to give them an answer right now, but if we're an absolute no, then they'd like to know so they can just look elsewhere. The truth is, and I don't have enough information about how long it would take to do something like that, or numbers, because they don't either. They're just in the beginning stages of vaccination right now. So like I said, they're looking for those spaces, the large open spaces that are easy to access, handicap accessible, bathrooms, things like that.
Have they looked at the city, Rod?
I can't answer that question, Bob.
Okay, I have an opinion on this. I feel quite strongly that if we are limiting volunteers to help our teachers, if we are limiting parents to watch athletic facility or athletic events, if we are limiting how often we're letting our kids get together or practices or how close they can do that, I feel like it is projecting the exact opposite of that to allow any person in Wood County into our building. To just open our doors and say, yes, please come in. You could be sick. We don't know. Come in and get in our school, when we're limiting everything that all the kids are able to do, all of our staff is able to do, all of our community, not to mention the fact that it could interfere with sports practices or whatever else we have going on. I feel like this is a bad look for our school to have open doors when we're trying to limit exposures. And I might feel differently if there weren't a different option with the community center in Pittsville. I feel like that's very easily accessible. It's handicap accessible. It's an open space. So I might feel differently if there weren't other options available. But for us to say we can't allow volunteers to come in and help our teachers, but we're going to allow people come in and get a shot, I have a hard time supporting that.
This is Bob. I think that's a pretty good argument, Mandy. So I sort of go with that idea. And I think you brought up a point. I do have a city council meeting coming up, and I don't know if they've even been approached. So, I mean, to me, that would be a more logical place. I realize it's not as big. It's not as nice. The facilities are all there. And they do run voting in there, so they do keep the people segregated and apart. So we'll just leave it at that. But I do agree with you that it does seem like, we're bringing folks in that, possibly are non-symptomatically COVID, and that could be a problem.
Was this actually talked about being run during a school day?
So they don't know what the timeline is. So it could be run during the week, could be run, on the weekend. Facility wise, they're looking for facilities that, like with that part of the building, they could basically segregate from the other part of the building. And it was big. So again, we can say that at this time we're not interested. That's not a problem. I could even mention to them that, we do have a community center that we vote in that is the size of a basketball court, because basically it used to be a basketball court. But they're just feelers. They were wondering, and they didn't give me any other details, I guess, other than just large space that they could separate from other areas to do this.
Yeah, I have some of the similar concerns. I guess maybe not as strongly, because I guess I'd want to know when they're going to do it, how they'd want to do it. Because it also, I think, would be a bad look of Pittsville High School won't help end COVID. I mean, that would be that would not be something to want to read in the paper. Not that I doubt the clinic would do that, but I don't know. I guess I'm torn on a little bit. If it would help us get past COVID 2 weeks quicker in our county, and maybe they throw in free vaccinations for any staff member that wants them, I'm sure you could work a deal.
So, yeah. So what I can do is I can share our discussion. I can share, our concerns about, the not having volunteers, and we're going to allow a bunch of strangers from all over the county in, but like I said, there's just a few things trickling out now about how they're going to do the vaccination distribution, what tiers are going to get done, when it's going to come, number of doses available, all these different things. And one of the things that has come out in our meetings this week is that they're thinking that the soonest that they're going to get to schools, and keep in mind, these vaccinations are for 16 years and older. They're not for for youth, right? They're talking like spring, summer by the time they might be able to get to education. So I mean, the things that we're doing, we're going to need to keep doing to keep ourselves safe in the meantime, and then, you know, and just grow it. And then we'll be looking in the rearview mirror, hopefully by the time we, you know, we're sometime in the summertime. So, yeah. So Mandy, I have no problem sharing, and Nate and Bob and Connie and Jane sharing those sentiments. They're not looking for yes or no, and I'm going to tell them we're kind of leaning towards no. And Bob, if they're looking for other places, I can mention the city, and then if the city wants to, they can say yes, and if they don't, they can say no too.
Yeah, that's correct. So I'm surprised they didn't just ask the city, because to me that's more logical. But
it was conversational. So like I said, I talked to the county virtually every single day. So this is something that came up and we just talked about it. So I brought it to the board.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, then let's move on to the CTE project update.
So this one will go pretty quick. I had let the board know in an update that we did get our bids back for the EFS, which is the exterior finish on the building, the administrative building, and the high school. So they want to get it to match. They had estimated about $50,000 to do the EFS on the primary school. When they put it on the new roof, they put on the EFS siding, and that bid came in right at about 50. It was like 49.9. Drywall was the other bid we didn't get an original bid on, and we did get two bids on that. One came in at $106,000. The other one came in at $116,000. Neither one of them had the insulation or the sound deadening that was supposed to be in the bid. Now, Keller had estimated that to be about $65,000. So we've been kind of beating the bushes to try to figure out why that estimator was off so much. Kelly and I have had a few conversations, because I said, if you're going to estimate this, you got to make sure this is the amount. It's not going to be more than this. And he was sure it wasn't, but it was an estimate. So, and when I talked legally, he said, yeah, it's right on the thing as an estimate. So it's not something we can have. Keller doesn't have to pay the difference. So we do have $100,000 in the contingency fund, which would make up for that extra, I can't remember what it is, 42,000 or whatever it is to cover that. So, I mean, and that's why you do have a contingency for something like this. The only things that are on that list right now that don't have bids were the EFS and the drywall. So that would be it. Any other changes that would be made on our order, because I've been at the contractor meetings every week with Kelly, and he was adamant from the start before they ever bid, there will be no change orders. And if they are, you have to deal with the cost change. Now, we also did have earlier, one of the contractors missed something in the bid. He won the bid, and unfortunately for him, it was about a $50,000 mistake on his part. His option would be he could give up his insurance for the project, and then we could go to the next bidder. And the next bidder, ironically, was the cost of what his insurance plus what he won the bid at. So it wouldn't cost any more money. It wouldn't cost the district any more money, but that contractor has decided that they're going to make good on the bid, because one of the first things they ask bidders when they go bid jobs, have you ever had to back out on a bid that you've won? And as soon as you do that, that eliminates you from some options to bid on jobs. So it's unfortunate, but the truth is, if he would have bid the amount with that in there, he wouldn't have got the bid the other guy would have. So in this case, the bonding aspect of it worked out just like it was supposed to. So we have, I've met a few of the contractors. Dan's been in the meetings too. They've all been, I think, really professional. Some of them are very interesting, for lack of a better term. But Rich, our site manager, and Kelly and Ryan, who's looking at the project, they're on top of this. When I ask them a question, they get back to us. Dan's had several things he sent out to them or they've asked for, and usually, within a day or two, we got the whole thing resolved. Dan, is there anything you wanted to add about the building project?
No, everything's going good. It looks like they started the footings today, so things are moving. Short of that, I mean, everything's been pretty painless, like you said. You know what? If we've had issues, they've dealt with them right away. So, been very happy. Rich is seems like he's doing a great job. So
we'll be expecting to get the superstructure and the steel siding. That's all going to be coming in January, and it doesn't sound like the erection of that's going to take real long, huh, Dan? Like 2-3 weeks.
yeah, I believe that's what they had down there is starting the end of January or February, right in there, the beginning of February, and getting it done in a couple of weeks.
You know, and then they'll run all the groundwork, plumbing, electrical, all the stuff that's got to go through the ground, and start getting things established. And then one of the last things they're going to do before they start putting the walls in, then would be pour the cement on the inside. So, yeah, so project is at this time is on schedule. There's no delays on materials or anything that are coming. Contractors are all up. A couple of them might have nothing going on right now, so they wanted to get access to the building, which we let them do. And they might do a few things here and there to make the job go a little quicker when they do get in on their timeline. So, yeah, so everything is going well. As far as the drywall, we got a little bit of time before we're going to have to just pick one of those bidders. So we don't really have an option because we didn't get anybody to bid on it in the first place. So I will keep the board informed about where we go with that.
This is Jane. One question on the drywall. You said it did not include the insulation.
Right. So that was requested in the bid, and it's for sound deadening between the rooms.
Mm-hmm.
And both of the contractors that bid it specifically put in the bid, it does not include it. So that's what, by doing that, they opened it up so we could actually do it outside of the project if we could find somebody to do it. And that's what Dan and I have been trying to do. See if there's somebody that'll do it without having to bond it. If they don't have to bond it, maybe that saves us $10,000 or $12,000. So anyway, so far we haven't had any bites on that though, have we, Dan?
No, nothing yet. I'm actually starting to look a little further out than just local. I'm trying to look at Eau Claire and maybe Wausau and some bigger places, see if there's maybe some larger contractors that might be interested. So that's something I've been working on.
Keller said the insulation, to add the insulation would be anywhere from $5,000 to $7,000. So that's one of those numbers that I will hold Keller to now that he missed so badly on the drywall. So, okay.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Next is the broadband expansion update.
So everything is done. So Marianne Lippert, she assembled and submitted several hundred letters of support for Wood County and specifically for the Pittsville School District area. Like we had talked about before, Bug Tussle is the company that's looking to do the rural expansion in Wood County. They want to put in 17 service points in the county. 10 of the service points will be in the Pittsville School District. There's actually 2 of them. There's like a City Point East, City Point West that they're going to put into to improve their service. So anyway, everything is submitted, and that's for the grant proposal. I believe Bug Tussle is going to go forward whether they get the grant or not. The only thing that is contingent with the grant is the amount of money that the county has to borrow to loan to Bug Tussle to do the work. There is a financial advantage to the county funding it because they're going to get about 0.5% of interest benefit on the loan that they're taking out based on what Bug Tussle pays them and what they can borrow the money for. So that was the one stumbling block that was overcome immediately as soon as the county realized that they were going to make money on the money they borrowed and if they financed the project. So anyway, so that's all in order. If anybody sees Marianne Lippert, she was very, very thorough, and she did what she needed to do right up until the last minute to make sure that she had all the things she needed. So it's been submitted. We won't know about the grant at earliest, maybe summer or fall next year. So competitive grant. So that's where we're at with it. Some of the expansion areas are like water towers or existing towers, and they're looking at those structures literally like right now.
Okay. Any questions on that? All right, thank you. Let's move on to the first reading of updates to policy 423, full-time open enrollment.
Okay, so both policy, so it's policy 423 and rule 423. There's about open enrollment. One of the things that they look at is they look at a random draw for open enrollment. So for example, if we say we have 10 seats available in fourth grade and we get 15 kids that apply for fourth grade. So it's a random draw. So the way we've been doing is we've been doing a first come, first serve. So we get them in and then we get a date when they come in, and then when those seats are full, we make a waiting list. And then on the waiting list, we would not do a random draw. We would still do first come, first serve. Now, things that we would look at in our policy would be, some things that might guarantee approval if you're on the waiting list. For example, if you were a previous student here, if you had siblings that were enrolled here. Let's see. We wouldn't look at part-time attendance. We'd look at full-time attendance. But those are the main things. But what we really want to do is we're not going to do a random draw. We are going to do, if somebody got their paperwork in first, then that would be the first person on the waiting list. Then we'll go down the list in that order. The other thing that we added to the open enrollment, just to be clear, was about requirement for attendance. That we do, if you're going to be open enrolled here, you can't be a habitually truant student. If you're habitually truant, we're going to send you back to where you came from, and somebody else can take your spot. So the exclusions were all WSB recommendations. The only thing different from the WSB recommendation was going with the random versus the ordered draw, if we had to draw, or we had more applications and seats available. So, and then the rule basically just spells it out again, and we've taken out the term random because we're going to do it in order in the event that we had to have a waiting list. So these are both first readings.
Is there any discussion, thoughts on these, or are we okay with moving them forward? It looks like I'm seeing nods. We are okay with moving them forward? Okay. All right, then let's look at first reading of updates to policy 343.4, exhibit.
So this is one that we have to do every year, where we basically publish what our school report card scores are and our educational options. So because there was no school report card this fall due to the COVID and some of the other testing things that were not done, we are instructed to use our scores from the previous year. So the scores that will be represented in there will be the scores that we had put on the report from the report card last year. As far as educational options, we offer all of the mandated state educational options for all of our students, in addition to some of the things that we've created homegrown, and the fact that we are full partner members of the Rural Virtual Academy, which is included in that list. So, and that's it. It's really an annual notice is what it is.
Okay, any discussion about that, or are we all okay with moving that forward for a second reading? I'm seeing nods. Okay, we're good with moving that forward for a second reading. Okay, we'll move on to the next item, which is donations.
We did receive a $200 donation from the Central Wisconsin ATV Club, and it was to be used for school safety related training or curriculum within the school. So just to recognize it and say thank you. It's nice when our local organizations see value in investing in things like that. So just a recognition that we received $200 from the Central Wisconsin ATV Club.
Okay, thank you. All right, next is snow day planning.
So we had talked briefly about snow days, and everybody's thinking, well, geez, with all the virtual platforms we have, we never have to have snow days. That may or may not be true, depending on what kind of snow day it is, right? We get an ice storm and we lose electricity or we lose internet connectivity, we may still have a snow day. But so what Heather and Cynthia did is they worked with their staff to come up with some plans, and I'm going to actually let both of them take it from here. Heather, would you like to go first?
Yep, I can. So at the elementary level, we had to look at 4K through 3, and then 4, 5, and 6 through 8 separately. And with our 4K through 3, first of all, we have to acknowledge that snow days for children are supposed to be fun. So we wanted to provide accountability of completion of a day's work, along with flexibility for families, just as we've been doing this whole year. So I took what I had as a vision, and I got input from every group of teachers and then gave them the structured plan that they wanted. So, so 4K through 3, all families have been emailed 2 snow day packets. The same exact information is on our website, and they took hard copies home. So there's 3 places that they can access those packets. We asked them to keep the packets in a safe place at home, on our website, and parents have been emailed for access. They also have the flexibility, and they can turn it in within a week of that snow day. So again, providing families that flexibility if mom and dad aren't home and they can't work on that packet that day. Each of the grade levels have the expectation of a number of reading minutes that they need to be accountable for. So that's kind of the plan as far as 4K through 3. Each specials teacher is going to provide, or did provide, an activity in each of the packets, and then students are required to choose one, because if they were at school, they would only participate in one special. So it says that they can certainly complete all the activities, but only one of them is required. So that is 4K through 3. 4, 5 is in a little bit of a different boat, because they're used to coming to school every day. They don't have office hours that they connect with their teachers like 6 through 8. But the teachers were adamant that grades 4 and 5 do not use packets, because it would not be meaningful to all of a sudden have this practice packet or research packet not following the continuum of their learning. So everything in grades 4 through 8 are in Google Classroom Monday morning. So if there's a snow day, the children already have their activities in Google Classroom to complete. So they would not be missing a day's work. The only difference with 4, 5 is teachers are available for office hours at a very specific time. And like I said, the students in grades 4 and 5 are not necessarily as used to clicking on a Google Meet to meet up with the teachers. So they've been working on that. And then all the links are located on our website. So you could click on a teacher's name and time, and so it's at 9 o'clock, Mrs. Deniston is available. And then she will be on that Google Meet for that half-hour time for that class. So the kids will know they can go on there and connect with the teacher, as well as they're available via email throughout the whole day. So the other tricky part with that would be grades 4 and 5 do not currently take their Chromebooks home every day like our junior high students. So the teachers, again, were very confident that they would know that there's weather coming and that the students would take Chromebooks home. The other thing I did was I made sure that they contacted every parent, because the kids said, yes, we have a device at home if need be. So each of the homeroom teachers contacted the parents to verify. So if there's a few that maybe don't have a Chromebook, we will be flexible, just like we are right now with the completion of the work, because they have till the end of the quarter to complete work anyway. So that's what 4 and 5 looks like. And then for grades 6 through 8, we will treat a snow day just like a Wednesday virtual day, because we do not right now make the students go on a Google Meet on Wednesdays. They're available during their office hours. But again, it would be very confusing to the kids to all of a sudden change their schedule and say, okay, you have to be on the Google Meet at this time for this class. So a snow day for grades 6 through 8 will be just like a virtual day, and they will be working on the tasks in Google Classroom, and the teachers will be available. And if we had them available during their class time that would not be consistent with their Wednesday office hours, and I think would be very confusing to the children. Do you have any questions?
No, thank you.
All right.
Hi, so I just want to be sure that I understood the question correctly, that the question on the table is, what does snow days look like?
That's correct, Cynthia.
So for the high school, the snow days are going to look similar to what they would have been like in the spring. So if it's a snow day on a Monday or a snow day on a Thursday, or like, assuming of course this is up until the term 2 ends. So but we would just run synchronous classes. So right now it's optional. It's not optional, but we don't have students when they're in a distance setting. There isn't a requirement for them to be online on a certain block when they would have had a class scheduled. The goal was to keep the teaching entirely asynchronous and then have synchronous instruction with those scheduled meetings with the teacher online. So that would be the difference. Is if we were supposed to have school on a Tuesday, then the classes would still run at their regularly scheduled times. The students would just have to log into their Google Meet for that class to get the live instruction. Now, if, of course, there's always flexibility. If the device fails, somebody's internet's not working, whatever, there's always that flexibility. The plans for the curriculum plans should be in the Google Classrooms anyway. So the only disadvantage to a student whose technology doesn't work in that moment would be they'll just have to get the live instruction or schedule a Google Meet with the teacher. And if it's on a Wednesday, at least for the next 3 weeks post-Christmas, Wednesdays would be virtual learning days. So if that happened to be a snow day, then we would still do business as normal. So it's kind of just normal school, just slid into the virtual setting, just like we did in the spring, but with a lot better planning because now we know what we're doing. Any questions?
So to just add a little bit too, so the principals right now, all of our staff that have any type of virtual learners, and so like 6 through 12, so they have office hours. So kids can contact them during their office hours. It's just open for any of those kids. The other thing is all of the teachers in the district by the start of school Monday morning have to have their week of what they're going to have for instruction laid out in their Google Classroom. So that stuff is available, though that work or those assignments or those projects are laid out in the Google Classroom at the start of the week. So if we would have a snow day, they would have access to that. So of course, the other side of it is, for the most part, we kind of have a little bit advance notice if we think we're going to have poor weather. And that's just a reminder. The kids are pretty good about taking their tech home every day, but some of our younger kids might need a reminder if it looks that way that they got to take their tech home. So, but having everything planned a week out, outline wise anyway, and having work there available for them, that helps out quite a bit.
Okay, any other discussion or questions on that? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to the legislative report.
Okay. COVID-19 school-related things with our Wisconsin government. They're going to be discussing limited liability, which is a big issue, not only in Wisconsin, but nationally. Comp grants up to $9 million are going to be discussed. School board approval of virtual instruction is going, and they're talking about it being required by a board to have 2/3 of a vote. I think that's probably aimed at a little bit larger number of school board members. And this one interested me a little bit. Provide payment to parents of $371 for a student who has had 50% virtual instruction since September. Now, again, these are things that may come up to our legislature. Just a note, I happened to read this yesterday. John Ashley, which is our WASBA president, does not support state mandates on schools. He leaves it to the schools themselves to, determine themselves, which I think is the appropriate situation. Some other things in the state, no COVID-19 relief is scheduled for December. The DPI emergency rules of licensing have been extended. Just to give you an idea, there are a bunch of new people that are on some major committees for schools. Mark Bourne, Budget Committee chair, co-chair, and Senator Darling is the new Educational Committee chairman. I'm not familiar with either one of these gentlemen. Well, I guess Senator Darling, I've at least dealt with through legislation stuff, but the other individual I have not. Again, we're going to be covering the superintendent administration renewals have to take place in January. I did notice one other thing here, budget challenges that they're talking about at the state level. States may need to spend down, let me say that again, spend down $4 million in order to balance the budget. You can take that one, think about it. Wisconsin district's property tax increased 3.3, which is not a great amount. The Office of School Safety grants update, school safety initiative grants. These are things that we can that are on the table to Act 143. And by the way, this one's due December 31st, if anyone was interested. Peer-to-peer suicide is due December 15th. I found something rather interesting on the WASBA channels, and all of you can go to that. If you the new DHS maps data tables for COVID-19. What you do is go to COVID-19 Wisconsin summary data. I found this rather interesting. As of today, confirmed cases in Wisconsin are 2,122. Negative cases are 5,228. Recovered are 88.5%. Active cases are 10.5%. Deaths are 0.9%. Hospitalized 4.4. I found those rather interesting. Also, females seem to have a little bit more of a problem with this than males, and I thought it was the other way around. 51.2%, and males 48.6%. Most of the COVID in the state of Wisconsin are with folks of the Caucasoid variety. Upcoming events, strategic planning. If you want to go to, and you would have to talk to Rod about this, I suppose, because these are things you have to pay for, I suppose. December 17th at 7 o'clock. And then there's some video updates on vaccine distribution. I think that's going to be a lot of stuff coming out. And you can go to the WASBA webpage for those things. Rod, do you have anything to add?
No, you covered a lot of different things there. The state is looking to spend down the $400 million budget surplus. And the numbers they have, when they do that, if they did that, they could meet current budget expectations with no increases in any area. So, of course, people are asking for increases. Education, they put forward a pretty robust budget request. One of the main things in there that we hope they do look at, if they have to look at anything, would be raising the amount of money that they put towards special education, because we're still, right now, 28% of our special ed costs are paid for by the state. We'd like to see in the next 4 years get that up to about 60%, because those are some pretty significant costs. So, so there's a lot going on. Alberta Darling, she's River Hills. So that's like the Nicolay School District around that area, very affluent area. So she has been in state government for a long time, very, very intelligent. And we're hoping that, that she's able to met through all the different things and make this about the state as a whole and not just certain areas. So, yeah. So that's it.
Okay, any comments on that? Okay, next up is public comments. Deb, are there any public comments?
I
Nope.
have a comment, Deb.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So it actually, it's from one of our staff members, and we didn't get a chance to put it in here. It's from Nick Bertino, our band director. Dear school board members, I'd like to thank all of you for the generous support you provided to the band department by approving my budget request. During my first year in the school district, I realized there was a big problem with some of our school instruments that were being rented out to our students. After I had sent these instruments in for repair, Hyde Music declared many of our instruments as unfixable or too outdated to repair. Due to your support, the Pittsville Band Department students will not be playing broken or severely damaged instruments this year. Our band department will be taking large strides in the right direction because of your support. Thank you. This money will be well spent. The band department is acquiring 3 new trombones, 4, oh boy, I don't know what that is, 4 other instruments, 1 tuba, 1 bass clarinet, 1 piccolo, and 1 concert snare drum. The brass instruments will be dispersed to the renting families of the middle school and high school students, while the piccolo, bass clarinet, tuba, and snare drum will be strictly for the high school students. Purchasing these instruments is a great investment. In future years, annual rental charges will bring money back into the school district. Over time, this will show that this investment is worthwhile. Students and parents will be required to fill out a school rental contract that's been in place to protect the new instruments from damage or neglect. The contract goes over the responsibilities of the student and the parent while the instrument is in their possession. Each instrument case will also include an instrument cleaning kit and instrument cleaning guide to help prevent mold or plaque growth inside the instrument. We have fantastic young musicians who are ready for the next step in their musical journeys. Learning on these new instruments will challenge the high achieving students and support our low achieving students by creating a new depth of sound and playing ease for the bands at each grade level. Your support in the band department will give our students the tools that they need to grow as musicians. Thank you again for your approval on my request. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week. Sincerely, Nick Bertino, Pittsville School District Band Director.
Okay, any other comments?
Those were euphones or similar to baritones? Okay?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. Next, I will entertain a motion to convene into closed session per Wisconsin State Statute 19.851C.
So moved.
This is Nate, I second.
Roll call vote, please, Connie.
Nate,
Yes.
Mandy,
Yes.
Jane. Jane,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Connie, yes.
Okay, we are enclosed. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Yep, everybody else can check out except for the board for a minute here. And Deb. Okay. All right. So I think what we're going to do is we're not going to use the link. Jane and Bob, if you guys are okay, I'm going to call you on my phone and I'll just have you on speaker. Is that okay? Okay. All right.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't hit my button.
Yeah, that's okay. So everybody, you guys don't shut your computers down yet because we got to come back after closed session. But go ahead and turn off. If you got to use the restroom for a couple minutes, go ahead. We're going to go into the auditorium. Okay? So I'll be out in a couple minutes and use the bathroom or whatever else you have to do. We'll reconvene in 5 minutes in the auditorium. Okay?
Thank you.